So just a just a kind of a few words of introduction and context. What is the world in which this debate is happening? Well, first of all, this year, if you look at the measure of Earth overshoot, that day in the year when we start consuming more products and generating more waste than the biosphere can safely replace and absorb, it moved further earlier in the year by about a week to the 24th of July, moving in the wrong direction. It's been moving consistently in the wrong direction since about the 1970s. The latest review of planetary boundaries indicated that 7 of the 9 boundaries identified have been transgressed and that things are not looking great for the other 2. And that some of the life choices that people have been making in terms of things like vehicle choice, the shift to SUV ownership, suggests that behavioral patterns are moving us in the wrong direction, often pushed by marketing and advertising and sponsorship. This year has or rather last year was the hottest year on record globally. And I think just today we've seen the latest data on the highest concentrations of CO2 being reported. And almost on a daily basis, we get reports of glacial retreat, extreme weather, et cetera, et cetera. And in the context of all of that, economically, we're seeing the promotion of business as usual, a politics, certainly in this country, in the UK, which is being prioritizing old-fashioned orthodox economic growth, putting nature second. And one of the questions I suppose that we'll be addressing today is that, is there a danger that with artificial intelligence, that if it enables and intensifies things as they are in a business as usual scenario, with today's inbuilt biases, will it be like putting, an Olympic athlete on hormones, on steroids? What do we know? We know from looking at some of the latest research on lifestyle emissions, and looking at 25 of the highest of the high, upper, middle, and lower middle income countries, that the emissions per person are about 7.1 tons of CO2 equivalent, and that's more than 6 times what will be aligned with the 1.5 degree temperature target recently sort of set by the IPCC and constantly restated. For the target, which would be 1.1 tons of CO2 for the year 2035. And we know that it's extremely unequal. We know that in the US, their lifestyle emissions are more than 10 times, for example, those of Nigeria. We know that 3 big areas of how we live, nutrition, housing, and transport, are consistently the primary drivers of our sort of lifestyle-related emissions, and that they account for anything between 2/3 and 95% of total lifestyle emissions. So those are some of the big ticket items. But when we come to some of our patterns of online energy use and living, some of the latest research from the International Energy Association indicates that electricity demand from data centers worldwide is set to more than double by 2030, to slightly more than the entire electricity consumption of a country like Japan, and that AI will be the most significant driver, with electricity demand from AI optimized data centers projected to more than quadruple by 2030. In the US, in particular, data centers are set to account for almost half of the growth in electricity demand between now and 2030, and that, driven by AI use, the US is set to consume more electricity in 2030 for processing data than for manufacturing all energy intensive goods combined, including aluminium, steel, cement, and chemicals. And that slightly does my head in. And on inequality, we know, big picture stuff, the wealthiest top 10% of the global population is responsible for nearly half of all emissions, while the bottom half, the bottom 50%, account for less than a third. And the trend is worsening, with some estimates indicating that the top 1% of global wealth share could rise from around 38% to about 46% in 2050. That asymmetric distribution of benefits that fuel inequality is a driver of both division, poorer well-being, and overconsumption. And we know that AI could be an engine of global inequality. If you look at the Center for Global Development, for example, have looked at three of the big dynamics there, that richer countries are better equipped to harness AI's benefits, poorer countries may be less prepared to handle AI's disruptions, and that AI is intensifying pressure on traditional development models. That relates to things like sort of manufacturing. And there are some estimates that suggest that, for example, in the Bangladesh garment industry, there could be a 60% loss of jobs due to automation by 2030. But AI could also be an engine of domestic inequality, negatively reinforcing existing biases. We look at research, for example, in the US housing market, where AI algorithms were found to reject up to 80% of mortgage applications from Black families, perpetuating historical discrimination. And we saw in the UK during COVID, when AI systems were used to downgrade exam results, that disproportionately affected those from disadvantaged schools. In the context, and in this context, we see concentration of ownership in crucial online media platforms. 7 of the top 10, 15 online platforms used to access news in the UK are owned by Meta, Alphabet, and the X Corporation. And just 3 companies, DMG Media, News UK, and Reach, dominate 90% of the national newspaper market, and that Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus account for 75% of all UK video on-demand subscriptions. We realize that this does have some political implications. In 2024, Alphabet, that's Google to others, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon, all allegedly supported election candidates who were climate deniers, and that the Trump administration announced a set of sweeping AI policy recommendations, which included loosening of the Clean Water Act in relation to data centers, and that mirrored suggestions made by both Meta and a major data center lobbying group that represents the likes of Google and Amazon. Mark Zuckerberg, now sort of famous, or possibly infamously, said that he was optimistic and celebrating after minutes after Trump ordered the nation's exit from the Paris Agreement, although it wasn't directly in relation to Trump's doing that, but it was just rather unfortunate timing. And that millions poured into the inaugural committee for Trump from Apple, Microsoft, and Google. And we add to all of that the interesting and colorful news that the BBC recently reported that tech billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg are so-called doom prepping, and that is building vast subterranean luxury bunkers to retreat into as a form of what Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, called apocalypse insurance. So as a reminder, just to sort of get us going, what is the challenge? That if we were to align with the 1.5 degree temperature target by 2035, the average lifestyle emissions would have to fall about between 82 and 94% for high-income countries, 64 to 81 for upper middle-income countries, and 29 to 67% for lower middle-income countries. So with that in mind, whirlwind tour, mini state of the world, we are here to discuss the polluter and cyber elites and whether or not that is a lethal alignment. And I'm absolutely delighted to say we have an extraordinary range of speakers to listen to.